Chapter 17 Biology Theory Video 13. Now we are going to discuss about genetic isolation. That is what causes this speciation to take place. That is, how does an existing species change into a different species? So this has to happen as a result of an isolation. That is, there has to be some sort of a separation from the original group by some means. So they are not able to interbreed successfully. So as a result, they might interbreed successfully, but the resulting species might not, so resulting organism might not be able to reproduce. It would be infertile. So until this happens, there has to be some sort of a separation. So this separation, or in another form, we can say that it is isolation. This isolation needs to take place, and that isolation will result in different alleles to be produced, and that alleles will change the gene pool. So now the organisms, interbreeding organisms, need to be separated into two groups, and this separation should result in a reproductive isolation from one another. That means they are genetically isolated. There cannot be any gene exchange between the two groups until, and also so as a result, they will be no longer they will not be able to interbreed anymore. So reproductive and genetic isolation, as we call it, will happen due to many reasons, and it can also take very different forms. Now, for example, one individual of a particular organism, of a particular species, might not identify another mate as another organism as a mate. They might not respond to mating behavior. Then the animals might be physically unable to mate, or they might be incompatible. Then now if you take plants, pollen and stigma might be incompatible. Then the female gametes might not be able to fuse with the male gametes. Then the zygote might not develop into producing a complex organism. Then the offspring might not survive for long. Then like in the mule, the offspring would be viable, that is, the offspring will be available, but they might not be fertile. So this is the process known as speciation, that is a new formation of a new species. So then there are two main ways how this can happen. First one is that is the separation or isolation that we discussed earlier. It can happen because of geographical barriers separating these species into two groups. Maybe a flood, a massive flood, causes these two species to be separated into two islands, and they might this flood might create a permanent barrier between the two species. So there is no genetic transfer taking place, and these species will get adapted to those conditions in the two different environments, and as a result the genetic pool will change because of the new alleles being formed, and finally they will no longer be able to interbreed even when they are put together. So then another way of other than the geographical barrier, there could be reproductive isolation even when they are living in the same place. We are going to discuss about a specific phenomenon known as allopatric speciation. Now, geographical isolation has practically been a major way of how evolution has taken place for many animals. For example, the Hawaiian and Galapagos Islands. These Galapagos Islands are quite famous because that is where Charles Darwin carried out his theories of evolution, and he studied the animals there, and he developed the theory of how evolution has taken place. So these the Hawaiian and Galapagos Islands are very beautiful places, and they have species of many kinds of animals and plants who are not found anywhere else in the world. Now, when you say that different animals have common ancestors, for example, the giraffe and zebras have had common ancestors. So, but they are different from one another because of the geographical isolation, and that resulted in them being adapted to their environment, and they are quite different to one another now. They are two different species. So now geographical isolation, like I told you, could be a stretch of water or something that separates these animals. So now, for example, if you take the Hawaiian Islands, maybe some birds flew off from the mainland America into Hawaiian Islands, and they got isolated there. Could be they might have been, they cannot fly that far without any aid. So they did not get on a plane and go there, but they would have been flown off course by a massive storm, and they landed in this in Hawaiian Islands, and because of the separation between the massive mainland and these Hawaiian Islands, they started living there, and now they cannot fly back to mainland without that odd storm that blew them into this island. So because that is not likely to happen, they started living there, and they became genetically different from their predecessors or their ancestors. So as a result, now the conditions between the island population, the island and the mainland, they are different. So then selection pressures in the island are different from the mainland. As a result, different allele would become prominent in the island. So the morphological, physiological and behavioral features of the island population will become different from mainland population. And as a result, because of this change in genetic pool, they are no longer able to interbreed with the mainland population, even they are put together. So now a new species has evolved. So this is known as a result of geographical separation. If a new species is developed, we call that allopatric speciation. Right, let's write down a note on that. I hope you understood. If you have any questions, please ask. Write down genetic isolation. Evolution will take place when organisms are genetically isolated, where they go through reproductive isolation, resulting in the genetic isolation. This can happen due to, number one, individuals not recognizing one another as potential mates. Number two, animals being physically unable to mate. Number three, incompatibility of pollen and stigma in plants. Number four, inability of a male gamete to fuse with a female gamete. Number five, failure of cell division in the zygote. Number six, non-viable offspring. That is the offspring dying out soon. Next one, viable but sterile offspring, example mule. This separation could happen due to a geographical barrier separating the species into two groups, or while the species is still living in the same place. Next topic, allopatric speciation. When a species separates into two groups geographically, they will get adapted to the new conditions where selection pressures result in these organisms having different alleles being prominent, and over time morphological, physiological and behavioral features becoming different from the other group. This results in a new species being evolved. This method of speciation as a result of geographical separation is called allopatric speciation. I hope you understood. If you have any questions, please ask.